Good morning to you. This is the second time that I've had an opportunity to address you, and I've got a lot more to say today. And I want to let you know that you are on my maiden voyage with a PowerPoint. I have never done one in my life. Suzanne Smith leaned across the table to me and said, "Surely you didn't do it yourself." And I said, "No, Jim Letty helped me do it." But I gave him the stuff that I wanted to go in there, so if I hit the wrong button, or maybe it'll keep me contained. I want to do something that's a little different today. We share the same value, we share the same commitment, we share the same, I think, projected sense of urgency about climate protection in Sonoma County. But that world is very small when you look at it across the nation and across the continents. It is very small. And so what I'm going to offer you today is a little sense of the politics that are out there that are working kind of outside our realm of thinking, that are going to direct traffic and how climate protection moves throughout the different global entities and the federal government as well. And I want to acknowledge without a doubt that the passion for me about this topic is that all innovation and all real substantive projects come from local communities. And without the acknowledgement of that at the state level and at the federal level and globally, we are lost in any kind of policy development that occurs. That has to be understood first. If it's not understood, then broad policy developments will occur that will totally leave us out and off the table. So that's kind of the first thing that I start with. So is this the button? Let's see. No? Is this the button? Yes. I think one of the first things that we start with is that there is already a recognition that people believe that global warming is a reality. And more importantly, people believe that there needs to be something done from a policy perspective. And when 3 out of 4 take that on, it really does provide a certain energy level in terms of where we go and what we do. And I want to use an analogy that is going to cause you to kind of rethink where we are around climate protection. I want you to think about tobacco legislation. In 1992-3, when I first came into the legislature, we passed the first bill in the United States around limiting tobacco use. It was before we ever got to secondhand smoke. That came afterwards. It was probably the battle of battles. Every industrial giant was out there fighting any kind of restrictions on the use of tobacco and cigarettes in any kind of common place. That today is so much part of our lives that I am always astounded when I go someplace and find people smoking. It took a while to get there, but I want you to look at that legislation because it really mirrors what's going on in terms of climate protection. In Copenhagen, that was my second introduction to the global world of climate protection. And it was very different than Poznan. Poznan was a community which was vibrant, it was dynamic, it was filled with young people, it was filled with energy that was infectious about wanting to make a change, about being part of it together. And Copenhagen was different in that it had, and it's an interesting balance that occurred. Remember, in the Kyoto Protocol, it requires a consensus to be built. It doesn't require a majority vote, it requires a consensus to be built. 193 nations that come from such incredible diversity, it is hard to even see them sitting in the same room and fear how they're going to get to a common goal, get to a common place, how they're going to coalesce language and finance and be on the same page at the end. What happened in Copenhagen was good and bad. First, it was good in that 123 dignitaries arrived that had not been there in Poznan. It provided a security risk. So in the Bella Center, which held 15,000 people, because of these 123 dignitaries, they literally broke down the venue and kept literally everybody out. As Suzanne Smith knows, after waiting a day in line, and Jake McKenzie, it caused all kinds of activities to occur outside the Bella Center, not at the center itself, which was slightly different. So then the question was, well, what did happen in Copenhagen? Was it anything worth happening? A couple of things happened that were very vital. The first of which is President Obama arrived. He had no mandate from the Senate. He had no mandate at all. But he walks into the group, he immediately coalesces Brazil, South America, India, and China, and says, we need to look together at what we do for the future. We don't have a mandate, but we've got to work together. And they actually signed a Copenhagen Accord. It was, didn't have the beef behind it, as Bill McKibben would like, but it is a direction forward. And afterwards, in looking at what had happened in Copenhagen, the record number of communities, local governments, states, municipalities that actually moved an agenda forward was phenomenal. And in fact, it was noted that it was the highest number of government climate protection initiatives launched ever. So when you ask, did it have an outcome that we could glom onto and say, this is where we want to go, it did. There is not now a place in a global arena that is not looking at different ways of dealing with climate protection. They're not dealing it with the same way, but they are dealing with it. One of the things that we were trying to get moved forward is this statement, where it recognizes the value of local government. I can't see, oh good, you can see it. I can't see it on my own page. What we're looking for is either putting this statement in the preamble or putting it in the operational section. We were not as successful as we would have liked to have been, but we look forward to Mexico City and the conversations keep going. It is still my belief, my absolute belief, that unless we have a statement that recognizes what local government does, we will never be part of the policy discussion. So now I want to go to the federal system. And now I'm going to shift from policy to politics, because now that's what it's all about. We're in an election year. We have an oil spill down in Louisiana. We've got generation of different sympathies moving out there, and I want you to look at what we're dealing with in terms of lobbyists. We are not well fortified with 138 people looking toward renewable energy sources. So somehow the people have to rise up in that. And I love this statement from Al Gore about clean coal is like healthy cigarettes. But recognize that when you have a state like West Virginia and Pennsylvania and Montana that are absolutely dependent upon that industry, and it's not just for the fuel it provides, it's for the revenue, because those states were smarter than some of ours. They're actually taxing those industries. So there's a revenue that comes in from those sources too. So when you look at 50 states in the legislative body at the federal level, you are dealing with trade-offs that are extraordinary. And they're trade-offs that take the Democrats like Blanche Lincoln, like Mary Landrieu, like Jim Webb from Virginia, and put them in the absolute bind. What they look at for the country and what they look at for the very people that they serve. There is a wonderful article that I'm going to refer you to because it's so good. January 10th, 2010, Rolling Stone had an article about what has happened with the wars back in DC around making sure that no climate protection moves forward. I mean, really, the industries that are behind that are just monumental. It's a really good source for you to kind of look at where the players are and how it's occurred. But it's very difficult to build coalitions at the federal level. I did this yesterday. I did this PowerPoint yesterday. Yesterday, there were only 2 bills out there. Today, this morning, we have a brand new one. We have the Carrie Lieberman bill. It has just hit this morning. It's called the American Power Act. You can get to it by going, I'll give it to you later, but there's a website you can go to that actually spells it out in detail. And now I want to talk to you a little bit about the politics of this. Back last year, when the Waxman-Markey bill flew out of the House, and I don't mean that it was substantially flew because of the votes. It was only 219 to 212, but it was a Friday afternoon. I was sitting in Speaker Pelosi's conference center talking about health care reform, and they went to the floor at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon, and by 6 o'clock it was done. And nobody believed that that would have ever happened. It happened, in fact, Rahm Emanuel is said to have called Waxman the next day and said, I never thought you'd ever do this, but it got done. We all questioned 2,000 pages of what it meant, and the whole second section that had to do with cap and trade local government was nowhere involved, not a single mention of local government. The new bill that Carrie Lieberman have out, quite honestly, is as politically charged as you can get. Just talking to Barbara Lee from our Air Pollution Control Board, literally, there's probably tons of things that people aren't going to like. But you know what? Something's going to move, because it's the right time to move it. You've got the oil spill happen, you got people saying you got to move something, you got to move it, you got to move it, and so I want you to watch this as it moves, because you've got those 2 bills, one that'll come out of the Senate, one that'll come out of the House. They'll have to work together, and at that time, hopefully, we can have a say in the next steps with that. Now I want to talk about Sonoma County. It used to be when people saw me coming at the federal level, they would ask me about my favorite wine. Now they ask me about our best project. They know that we are on the leading edge. They know that we have projects that no one else has done. They also know that we have done something that is demonstrably different than anywhere else in the nation. We have 9 cities and a county that have agreed to do something. That is, you have no idea. You can talk to anybody across the country, they have no idea how that works. They say, what do you mean you got this city and this county? How do you do that? I said, because we have people in our county that all want the same thing. They want us to have clean air, clean water, and our quality of life to be withheld for the next generation.